incredible speakers. Dr. Alexandra Greenhill is one of Canada's leading physicians in digital health innovation and is the co-founder and CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Careteam Technologies, the digital health platform solving the fragmentation of healthcare. After having implemented health innovation at scale and practiced medicine in Quebec, Ontario, and BC, she now leads and advises Canada's most promising technology companies. Dr. Greenhill's work has received many recognitions, many deserved recognitions, including Startup Canada's Women Entrepreneur of the Year Award, YWCA Women of Distinction in the entrepreneurship category, WXN's Top Most Powerful Women in Canada, Business in Vancouver's Top 40 Under 40, and the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal of Service. So delighted that you are joining us today, Dr. Greenhill. And we read out a very formal bio, as we should, to acknowledge Dr. Greenhill's accomplishments. And I'll just acknowledge that moving forward, I will refer to her as Alexandra. And it's so great to be here with you today. I love that in our past worlds, we get to see each other at so many events and gatherings. And for those who know Alexandra, know that she is one of the most caring, energetic, and giving people. So I'm so glad that we get to have your energy with us today.
And I normally love hugs. And so I'm all giving you collectively a hug right now, virtually.
Received. And Cassandra, who is also joining us today. Hello, Cassandra. I see you. Is the heart and founder of Heal Mary, a platform that uses AI to translate medical jargon to plain language, which I can say I at least appreciate, to connect patients with health studies globally within seconds. She has over 10 years of experience creating in-person and digital engagements that span multiple sectors and is most proud of her work in the healthcare space, using community to remove barriers of access between surgeons, patients, and supporters. Cassandra was also one of our Pitch for the Purse semifinalists in 2019. Hi, Cassandra, so good to have you here.
So good to be here. It's so interesting to see because I was doing this session about a year ago and now I'm coming back to it. So thank you for having me.
Oh, so glad, so glad. Okay, so I am so glad to have the two of you today because we love that you were paired together and got to build a relationship, obviously from your bios, what that context of the background was. And so where I will begin is, Cassandra, I'd love to begin with you to first ask, what was your experience in your first initial meetings with Alexandra, and what have been your big aha moments as you experience the power of mentorship here?
Absolutely. As you can imagine, hearing that bio, and most people who know the medical space know of Alexandra's reputation. So it was monumental for us to be partnered with her. As you can imagine, being a startup, my experience is in technical and technology. So not having a lot of healthcare background, needing to surround myself with professionals who not only understand the medical space, but understand technology and how that's being used in healthcare. So those were sort of my must-haves, and obviously being partnered with Alexandra just blew all my expectations. And I would say my first few meetings with you, Alexandra, were about level setting and understanding the pathway. As you all know, it's a different journey we have to take, and for the first time, it was getting the experience and the journey of someone who's done this prior, who's actually positioned herself quite well in multiple industries. So for me, it was just understanding how she got there, some of my hesitations, some of my concerns, and having them addressed. And so I would say those were probably the first powerful things. And, the greatest takeaway in the first few sessions is being able to say, I don't know, is actually having a place where you can say, I don't know.
Having a place to say, I don't know. I mean, what a one precious space to be able to have that, but two, to build that kind of trust with someone where, you can get really thoughtful advice, but also show up as truthfully and vulnerably to do so. So Alexandra, similar question to you. I know you've both had mentors and of course been an incredible mentor yourself. What is your general, what is it that you love about mentorship, and how did the relationship unfold with Cassandra?
Well, so I have personally benefited so much from this, and I believe so strongly that I plan to have a mentor for me for the rest of my life. And some of them are micro mentors, people that you sort of periodically just contact and get advice without them having a proper title. But these deeper relationships that are commitment for a certain amount of time create a certain rhythm and opportunity to accelerate that growth even further. So I love the concept. I love the opportunity to take something that I've lived through that I didn't even realize is useful, or I didn't even notice that I'd actually done it, that can actually make the journey easier for someone else who is following. And these are the kind of things that, you know, you don't often think of publishing somewhere, like you're not sure where to publish. Will they be relevant? And how do I pick which parts of that are actually helpful to the other person in that particular moment? And so one of the things that I love about mentees, like Cassandra, are the people who actually go and do something with that input. The most frustrating thing is sometimes you have the circular conversation where between one meeting until the next meeting, you don't get a sense of the person progressing. They're asking you the exact same questions, or, you know, they haven't, sometimes there are reasons in life why you can't action the advice, but you get a sense that the person got it and they're just waiting to the right moment. And so the wonderful thing about Cassandra was that she just moved. And so you gave her a couple of, you know, when she said, I don't know the answer, as like, I love the fact that she would actually come up and say, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. Let me think about it and come back to you. And at the next meeting, she'd come back and she said, I've thought about it. I did what you recommend. I interviewed a number of people. Now I have a much better sense of where we're going. And I think that there was a number of avenues that were unknown facing her, that getting a quick sense of which ones are most promising actually positioned her to be further ahead than she would have been otherwise. And that's been a fun sort of seeing it in action, where, you know, one brief conversation can have such an impact. It was amazing fun.
I love that. And I really heard you say the power of looping back. So circling back. And let's talk about for a second on that topic of, you know, not progressing or not maybe taking advice. I know one of the challenges that can happen, especially if that trust isn't there, is what if you as the entrepreneur don't agree with the advice or don't want to take the advice? Or what if you're getting conflicting elements of advice from perhaps this mentor and then a different... Or what's your term for it?
It's not my term, it's the industry term. It's called mentor whiplash. It literally is, you know, so it's fun being the doctor to share that. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, let's talk about mentor whiplash. So as a mentee, Cassandra, how did you experience that? Did you experience that? And how did you navigate it?
I think it's, you know, not just for mentorship. I think as a business owner, every day you're given advice, whether you're dealing with clients or you're dealing with investors or whatever branch. I think everyone's got advice based on their experience. I think the best piece of advice I ever got was, if you know yourself and you know what you're doing and what you're attempting to do, everything else falls into place. So I think knowing that people are going to offer you advice, and if you can explain why you chose it a certain way, that is very, very powerful, because now you're giving a reasoning that both you and whoever you're speaking with can understand. I think if you're hearing the advice and your first instinct is to fight back and you don't actually know why, I think that's probably a line of questioning you have to go further down. So in a sense, you know, I think it's always about being open and transparent. And if you have a reason for why you're not doing something or why you are doing something, to be able to explain it goes far, because that person, in this case, my mentor, is supporting me. So if I have a reason why I'm not taking it, she can actually help me, guide me another way if there's another option to it. So it's really, really powerful to understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and to augment on that is, I think it's helpful for somebody who is mentored to not promise, oh, I will do it, because I don't need that commitment. That's not why I'm here. You may get a completely different perspective that is closer to what you want to do from the next conversation you have, or something else might happen. But being my sort of job, as I see it, is to help see perspective and things that you're not paying attention to as you're constantly running forwards really fast towards an objective, that there may be another objective that is easier to get to, or you need to modify what you're doing because you're not going to get there. It's not, you can't sustain that rhythm or energy, and you need more people on your team to help you. And so it's these questions around, maybe. And so I think good mentors ask good questions in my experience, and don't expect you to take everything that they say, but they will expect you to do something with it. And so if I ask the question, the comeback could be, I thought about it and made me realize that something else was true and I did this. And you're like, great, my question had impact.
It's that it had impact and that there was that consideration of it. I also heard you talk about both building the trust, but also of mentors helping unlock blind spots. And I know it can sometimes feel like when a question is asked, especially if you're like in it, if you are so deeply in it as an entrepreneur, when someone asks you a question and it's a moment of vulnerability, or perhaps it's something that feels like an area that you don't feel strong in right now, it can almost feel like a personal attack, or like they're not on your side, but they're challenging you in a way that doesn't feel supportive. Have you ever found yourself in moments like that, Cassandra? And what have been some tools to help you overcome perhaps that initial moment of wanting to go, no, you're wrong, or let me prove this to you, as opposed to being able to kind of embrace and consider?
Absolutely. Well, I think something flashed in the chat box, and I hope I read it correctly, but I think Irene posted something about just sitting with it, and, you know, being with it and embracing it. If you truly believe that the person sitting across from you has your best intentions in mind, and the line of questioning is authentically just to help you see something differently, or is something that they're not clear about, you're so into your business every single day, you should know it better than anybody else. And so sometimes I think we get caught up and we forget that other people are asking those questions authentically to clarify and further understand. And so I think if you go in with the mindset of knowing that your mentor is, you know, dedicating an hour of their time to helping you see things a little bit clearer, and their intentions are honestly in your best interest as well, it's a lot easier to sit with that feedback. If you find yourself getting worked up, as Alexandra said, you know, sometimes I would just take it away and say, I don't know, and then go figure it out on my own time, right? There doesn't have to be an answer there. And what I loved about the mentorship program, or at least with my mentor, is there's a lot of questions back and forth. So it wasn't like Alexandra would say, well, I think you should try this. She would always ask me, well, have you looked at this? And then if I said, no, we haven't, she said, well, maybe take a look at that, and here's a potential solution. And I think that's super healthy because it makes the feedback easier to sit with.
There was a great, I love learning podcast, was founder of Stripe. And he said that his sort of biggest breakthrough after he became a CEO was to say, why would an intelligent human being have a completely different perspective on this than I do? And just sit there and sort of try and discover what are they seeing that you're not seeing, or how whatever you phrased doesn't come across as what they understand. And so communication is always a challenge. And, you know, in your mind, you've built this beautiful website and it communicates X. And so I think one of the sort of, I find the mentorship sometimes can be very philosophical. I don't like that type of mentorship. I like the practical one. And so the practical one may be an introduction to somebody who can help deep dive, a resource to read on something that you'll forever look for Google search and never find, or even just practical of like, hey, when you look at the website, these are the things that I hear and I get out of the service you're describing. That's not what you want to do. And so this is the gap, and help the person see the gap between the intention and the result. So it bridges from bigger questions as to like, why are you even doing this business? Which is the first question I always want to know. Because if whatever your objective is, my job here is to help your objective as opposed to impose my objective on you.
That is so helpful and such a good reframe to bring into the conversation itself, right? And so, Alexandra, you touched a little bit on the tactical and the tangible, so I want to stay with that for a second. What are some of the ways that you think as a mentee and mentor, some of the tactical pieces that really contributed to building your relationship? Like, I kind of want to get really granular. Like, was it, sending materials a week in advance of a meeting, or was it following up with agenda items? Like, what have you found that actually worked in relationships around mentorship that are really, really granular and tactical?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I'll ask Cassandra to contribute her own, but to me, the important reframe at the beginning of the conversation is that programs have official deadlines, schedules, and sometimes it makes sense for us to be meeting, according to a fixed rhythm. And sometimes the business is such that you may want to have 2 or 3 sessions closer up front to get to know each other, work through some issues, and then space them out, and then maybe schedule some on demand in between, because things moved faster than you imagined. And sort of establishing those ground rules at the very beginning and saying, I trust you to not bother me unnecessarily, but if you need me and our next session is booked for another 3 weeks, don't wait the 3 weeks, trigger a session now, or ask me the question by email, and maybe I can already answer. And it's that sort of a reframing and reconfirming the purpose of the relationship, and the fact that, typically a good mentorship means beyond the end of the program, we're still connected. It's like you graduated, but, you're not part of my tribe. And, whatever you need going forwards, I'm here because we got to know each other in a way that you don't get to know each other in business relationships or networking sessions. It's a much deeper connection. And for everyone who will tell you that mentees get a lot, we and mentors get a lot too. And so that's one of the things I always like to acknowledge at the beginning, because the questions that I get make me think about what did I do, what made me effective, and makes me remember things that I hadn't even thought about in a long time. And it improves my own ability to make sense of my story in life, and also of what I want to do going forwards.
I love that. Same question to you, Cassandra.
Yes, just to add, I guess, from my perspective, it was really about the cadence, knowing that ritualistically you had someone that you could follow up with. But as Alexandra said, she made herself available to me as needed. So for example, for us, we pivoted our platform in April to help with COVID-19 trials. And I think for a good 3-week period, I was booking Alexandra's time as much as possible whenever she had space to have consultation on it. And that's what made it really fantastic, is you have a routine, but you also, if you have a mentor that you can work with a little bit closely, you have flexibility. And I would say there was 2 things that really I tried to get from it. One was tactical. So especially for us during COVID, as we're pivoting and moving around, to really have good tactics in place. As Alexandra mentioned, she always connected us with people who could help us with our privacy, who could help us with some of our development needs. And then the second piece of that is information gathering. So especially in the beginning, getting to know her experience, her journey, what were some of the challenges she experienced, and then using that. So again, so that we already have a head start, in the sense we don't necessarily have to go down certain paths. So I think just making a note from yourself of whether or not you're needing something tactical at that time, or if you're needing something that's more informational or supportive, where you need some help connecting.
I love that, Cassandra, and getting really clear on what it is that would help you most and serve you. And I also heard you talk about digging in and understanding more of your mentor's past experience so that you could better understand even how they can further support you. And to me, that signifies really being able to ask thoughtful questions. And I think, when Alexandra, you were talking earlier around mentors helping unlock blind spots and helping kind of elevate and consider, to me, questions feel like kind of a superpower to bring to that relationship, to be able to dive into it. And I'm curious how you both, how you have learned to ask really thoughtful and considerate questions. And what do you think makes a good question a good question?
Well, in my case, I'm slightly spoiled because in medicine, those of us who prize patient relationships work really hard on the whole communication and how do you get. And so I was an emergency room doctor, and one of the things I was obsessed with is how do you quickly create trust? Because my ability to navigate the person successfully through that brief interaction and tell them that we're taking the right steps, treatments, investigations, the diagnosis is correct, depends on that. So, the key of what we've learned through that is to start with what the person really needs, but may be afraid of asking. And so whenever I introduce the relationship, I say, you can ask me anything. This is off the record. It's not being recorded. I trust you to keep it to yourself, and therefore I will be my authentic self. And so ask me about what it is like to have 3 children, lots of family members who've gone through health crises and yet manage my work environment, difficult conversations with people. Like, this is a wide range of questions where your biggest challenge may actually not be the business. It may be a partner who's not supportive of what you're doing, or too much on the slate of people who depend on your health. I've dealt with family members who are completely not supportive of anything that I did. They feel that the mother's role is with their children at home, and anyone else outside of the house is sort of failing them, and they've called me a part-time mother, which really hurt and still hurts. But it's like, how do we collectively bolster ourselves against some of these messages? Mentorship helps, networking helps, the conversations around e-series and creating a tribe of other entrepreneurs going through the same challenges. But it all starts by inviting people to ask the kind of questions in a mentorship relationship that they don't feel comfortable putting on LinkedIn, Quora, on any of the public forums, because it may be misinterpreted as to why and how they're asking their question, or the answers may not be as authentic as they need them to be.
Yeah, I want to go back to the idea of just being vulnerable and saying, I don't know. I think if you walk in knowing you can ask pretty much any question, and you're not going to be shamed for it, it's a really powerful space to be. And so building trust was fairly easy with Alexandra, and I think for me, most importantly, was just getting over the hurdle of not knowing the answers, and then knowing what question to ask, coming from the space of, well, I don't know, what do you think would be the next step, or do you know of anyone we can speak to? Your questions will usually come out of that space of, I don't know, but should we try something? What could you recommend?
I really love that. And I love that you've talked about trust. I was really hoping that would come up, because that is so critical. And it's interesting. I think there's a tendency, some of the questions that we get sometimes is, does my mentor sign an NDA? What do I share? Do I share the Excel with them? Do I not? And we always explain that the philosophy comes down to you're wanting to build a relationship where that trust is established in there, and you need to feel good about that and being aligned. I'm going to jump in a question that's come up in the chat here in a few different ways. It sounds like it's a question that is on everyone's mind, which is around the matching process for mentor and mentee. And so I'll share that at FWE, our philosophy around this is we support you through the application and allow space for you to identify what are some of the challenges that you're currently facing? What are your visions for your business? What are areas where you currently feel strong in and areas that you could use more support in? And all of those elements feed into helping find a mentor that might contribute to that. And sometimes it's someone that's really tactical in a specific space. Like, for example, might have great technology background or marketing or perhaps even accounting that you want to be matched with. But it is a bit of a stirring the magical pot in terms of, do you align based on someone who already has the experience, and are they on the same career path? Or is it someone from an entirely different industry that might lend a very different lens? And so Alexandra and Cassandra, I would love, perhaps maybe Alexandra, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that in terms of align? Does it need to be same industry or not? And how to keep an open mindset around what someone might be able to bring to that relationship?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and the match is key. And I've been through some matches that have worked out and other ones that haven't. And I've now learned that if at the first meeting you have doubts, it's important to either reset the relationship or get rematched. And so that doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it's pushing through doesn't seem to be successful. And what makes it a not successful match is if I don't know in the third meeting, what can I actually help with? Like, what does the person who actually want to achieve? I can't help them. And so having that clarity, you mentioned agenda earlier. I don't care about having a formal agenda sent to me ahead of time, but there needs to be something that you're striving to accomplish that the mentor can accelerate or make the path easier for you, or the experience more enjoyable, or something specific and tangible, and that's helpful. But someone who says, well, I would like to get better. Well, better at what? And I can't necessarily work without that drive that the person exhibits. And then the second piece is, I get solicited to mentor a lot, and I want to add the most value I can. And so obviously someone who is within my domain, it's easier to be more helpful to them than somebody who isn't. And I love the idea of mentoring people that are as close to me. So let's say a physician innovator or woman innovator, because then the personal aspects of the story become even more relevant to the conversation.
And that's so right. Like at one point in time, this part might be the part that needs the most support, versus at another part, having someone that can actually speak more into the personal side might be the part that's most valuable. Okay, how about for you, Cassandra? What are your thoughts on this kind of match industry area expertise?
So what I love about FWE, and I actually love the mentorship program, it's probably my favorite one, next to Pitch for the Purse. But the idea is the program manager, which I think was Melody at the time, she basically asked me, what's your wish list? What are you struggling with? What are the things that you would like to accomplish? And I mean, you pretty much know these things because of you know your business goals and where you need support. But also for me as a female entrepreneur, I wanted to be partnered with an entrepreneur who had gone through the ropes. I think when you're trying to raise money, it's very different. The experience is slightly different, and there are different questions and different biases that come into play. So I wanted to get that understanding. And so again, if you just know all of the areas in which you need support with, for me, again, my background is from technology. And so I really needed someone who had set a pace in the healthcare space. And so basically creating that wish list and all of the things I needed and sending that over to FWE is how they found me my little match. And I think it really paid off, getting really precise with that list.
I love that we've touched on clarity so many times. And I'm going to remind us all what you said at the beginning, Cassandra, which is you don't have to know the answer. Clarity isn't necessarily knowing the answer, but about being able to articulate what the needs are or what you right now think might be helpful. That might change down the road. 2 conversations later, you might go, oh, actually, this is the area we need to dive into. But to have that as a starting point, to loop back in the conversations, as Alexandra said, to do something with the information and the knowledge and insight that is shared, to be open and create a trusting relationship, to be asking each other inquisitive and thoughtful questions and considerations, and supporting one another. We could go on probably for the next hour and I would be equally engaged and ongoing, and we need to wrap up this portion. So with that, I am going to say a really, really big thank you to both of you for contributing your energy, your time, and your insights. Thank you. Thank you.